Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 14 years, and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, amazing listener. Happy New Year! Are you doing okay? I hope you've been having a good few weeks since the last episode of Check Your Thread dropped in mid-December. Lots of people have, of course, been celebrating over the last couple of weeks, so I know that getting your craft on might have been difficult. I was away from home staying with my husband's family for a couple of weeks, so I took my new knitting project to start, which was a great way for me to feel creative and productive whilst being away from my normal space, stuff and schedule. I hope you've found some ways to get some creative and making joy also. As with every year, I battled where I could to uphold some of my sustainability principles over Christmas. It was of course made harder by staying in someone else's home when you don't have much control over food choices, food waste, recycling and stuff like that. But where I did have control, I was able to buy lots of the gifts for my kids secondhand. I entirely avoided Amazon for anything, and I wrapped everything in either reusable gift bags, recycled and recyclable wrapping paper, and I used paper tape rather than sellotape. Another additional sustainability win I had was that whilst I was spending the day visiting some friends, I was able to undertake a lot of their clothing mends by using a little mending kit that they owned. I was able to stitch up some holes, rips, tears and loose hems on a blanket, blouse, jacket, dressing gown and a kid's onesie. Plus I've taken my friend's jeans home with me to repair the worn inner thigh area on my machine, and then I'll either send them back to her or wait until I see her again later this year. Even though my friends didn't feel confident enough to do these repairs themselves, it was great that they actually owned a mending kit and were excited for me to help them extend the life of their clothes. A number of lovely listeners recently have sent me some pics of scrap-busting Christmas presents and homeware that they've made recently, inspired by the conversations and episodes they've heard on this podcast. If you've had any festivity-related sustainability wins, be that sewing-related or more broadly, I would love to hear about them. As always, you can reach me via email, zoe@checkyourthread.com, or you can find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Over the last few weeks, the podcast has received patronage from 7 lovely humans. Thank you so much to Flor, Terry, Joan, Miriam, Lena, Caroline and Kelly for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. Patrons are the wind beneath this podcast's wings. There is no way I could devote the time and energy it takes to make a weekly podcast without them. So massive thanks to every Check Your Thread patron, past, present and future. If you're in a position to support what I'm trying to do with this podcast, please go to patreon.com/checkyourthread to find out how you can sign up to help. Okay, so on to the episode. Unless you're brand new to this podcast, in which case, welcome, you will know that there were no new episodes for a couple of weeks. To thank you for your patience, I've busted out a mega episode. A megasode for you this week. It's currently weighing in at over 1 hour 15 minutes, so get yourself comfortable or prepare yourself to listen to this one in instalments. So I make no attempt to hide the fact that I love a new year and a chance to reflect on the previous one and to think about what I want from the forthcoming 12 months. I think that setting new intentions is such a powerful activity and it helps us take control of what we want and how we live. This time last year, I made an episode, number 23 in fact, called Sewing Goals for the New Year. That one is an evergreen episode that will be relevant for every new year. So if you're looking for some guidance on setting goals and intentions surrounding your sewing life in particular, please go and listen or re-listen to that one. But instead of covering old ground, I decided to go even deeper this year for our New Year's episode. At the beginning of 2022, I was using the services of a coach to help me with my productivity, my planning, and basically my whole mental state around work. Probably the most useful activity that she encouraged me to do was to make a personal manifesto, which defined the entire foundation of what I'm trying to do and why. If the term manifesto doesn't resonate with you, then feel free to call it a plan or anything else that chimes better with you. And in fact, this is discussed in this episode, but I'm continuing to use that term because personally I really like it. Making my manifesto has given me a benchmark by which I can measure everything to decide if it's right for me or not, if it's worth my time and energy or not, if it aligns with who I am or not, or if it furthers my cause or not. So that's what I want to encourage you to do also, to make a personal manifesto. It does take a little bit of wrapping your head around, and it will take you a chunk of time, perhaps an hour or two, but I promise that it will be so worthwhile at a truly fundamental level. Just like traditional resolutions or goal setting, a personal manifesto can be made at any time of the year, of course. But with many of us being in a reflective and contemplative mood at this time of year, let's harness that and do it now, and let your manifesto take you into 2023 and beyond. So if we're discussing making personal manifestos, who better to get on the podcast than the person who encouraged me to make my own in the first place? My former coach and now friend, Kim Witten. Honestly, Kim is one of the cleverest people and the deepest thinker I think I've probably ever met. Plus, she's a lifelong crafter who's just taken up garment sewing and is a lot of fun. So I know you're going to love listening to her. Please make sure you go to the show notes for this episode on the Check Your Thread website. It includes links to everything Kim talks about, including her website, further explanations of the elements of a manifesto, where to find her free worksheet to help you make yours more easily, and where to sign up for her awesome weekly newsletter designed for overthinkers. Plus, there's some pics of her recent garment projects. Honestly, she is creating some wonderful stuff. And in this episode, we discuss her sewing journey, how she applies her strategic thinking and self-coaching techniques to improve her sewing experience. Even if this kind of exercise or self-exploration isn't really for you, please do give this episode your ears because I think you're going to find this conversation really interesting. So once again, Happy New Year to you, you awesome person. Here's my seasonal gift to you. Enjoy. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Zoe. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Yay! So this conversation is going to cover some different ground to previous Check Your Thread episodes. However, I'd like to start in the traditional way. So to introduce yourself, please can you let us know who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
So my name is Kim Witten, and I am currently in Manchester in the north of England. I know I don't sound like it. I'm originally from California in the States. And I am a transformational coach. I also do research and design consulting on the side, and I'm a lifelong crafter. And so crafting has always been a part of my life, whether that's knitting or crochet. And now I'm getting into sewing, thanks to you.
Kind of full circle. I love that. Brilliant. I have known you for about a year now, and I would just like to clarify for listeners how that came to be. So in the autumn of about 2021,
It was 21. Yeah. It's
sorry.
all a blur these years, aren't they?
Honestly, the last 3 years, not anything. You could tell me anything about, yeah, sounds right. So in the autumn of 2021, my son started school. And so that was like the first time in about 8 years that I hadn't been a full-time carer. So I'd already started this podcast at that point, but I suddenly had, with 2 kids at school, chunks of time that I hadn't previously had to actually really put a fire under what I was doing with Check Your Thread. However, I found that I was kind of floundering because I was kind of struggling a bit with this time, with my productivity and deciding what I should focus my energies on and how to balance all the things I wanted and needed to do. So I heard of your coaching services through a friend who you also coach, and I decided to sign up for myself. So we had weekly coaching sessions for about 3 months, and we'll get a bit more into the benefits that I've discovered through that in a bit. But I would love to know, first of all, what route did you take to becoming a coach? Because it's not one of those kind of when I grow up, I want to be kind of jobs, isn't it? I'm assuming, I'm projecting here, that it's a job that you arrive upon rather than set out straight from university, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to think of it, looking back on it now, that I was kind of circling it with all of these different careers. And I didn't realize that this was at the center.
Oh, how so?
I consider myself what this term that I've learned in the past year or so, a multi-passionate creative. So this is a person who has many interests and probably can get skilled at different things, but is always kind of jumping onto the next thing or finding some interest or hobby or skill to dive into. And so then, of course, with that, the challenge becomes like, well, what should I do? I could do these things. What should I do? And what I didn't understand for the longest time was I thought these were all disparate things. I didn't understand that there was a common thread, pun, a common thread that wove through all of these different careers. And as such, I didn't have the language to describe it. But what I realize now, from jumping from graphic design to becoming a linguist to getting into, I even had a stint at web development, which was probably a one-off and didn't really fit but it was good to learn code. And then getting into user experience research and then finally coaching, that this common thread was all about understanding people and motivations. For a long time, for many years, that was really focused on user experience research and design. So helping companies and organizations develop their products and services. So I'd be interviewing people, talking to people, and learning about what motivates them to buy something or how they use something. And I realized I was so interested in the people part of it that I could just cut the services and products out of the equation and just go straight to the people.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And, what will get them onto their journeys or using all of the things around them more efficiently or getting more things done? How do they want to live by their values and their strengths, play to their strengths rather than, let's say, the company that they belong to?
Oh, so interesting. So when did you finally twig, oh, maybe I should do some coaching?
It was probably about 2 years ago, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and there was some coaching podcasts, and they were really interesting. I've always been into personal development, self-help, all of that, and I was listening to these coaching podcasts, and there was one in particular that I was thinking, oh yeah, I might like to join her program. I could get coached by her, and then in typical kind of multi-passionate creative style, I was like, well, why don't I just learn how to be a coach and then I could help myself? And I thought, because I was working at a big corporate at the time, I thought this would be a really good skill to have in my back pocket. So even if coaching doesn't work out, and I didn't really have that full mindset of I'm going to leave my corporate job and start a business, I just thought, this would be something that would help me personally. It could help me professionally. And I was just kind of drawn to it, but I didn't know why. And now I'm looking back and realizing, oh, I brought myself there because I could see somehow that this was something that was akin to everything that I'd already been doing.
So it was kind of inevitable.
Yeah, I think so.
That's so cool. So you then kind of started studying and researching alongside having a full-time job?
Yeah, I started researching different coaching programs and certifications and just learning the industry. So coaching is an unregulated industry, unlike therapy, which has, these medical bodies and certifications and that sort of thing. Coaching is heading more towards regulation. And there's the International Coaching Federation, some bodies that provide accreditations and try to professionalize the industry more and more. So I was looking for programs that could teach me the skills that, were substantial enough and that were aligned with these bigger organizations. And I found one. It was a 5-month program and I went through it. And through that, I was coaching many clients for free as I was finding my feet. And then I realized it just kind of clicked that I really like this. I was really burning out on my job and getting ready to leave that. And so I just decided to make the break. And one thing that I also realized throughout all of this is as a coach, I basically became the person I needed back when I was struggling with my career and direction and trying to figure out why I was burning out or why I wasn't reaching my potential. And I did that the hard way and, did that without support. And looking back on it now, it's like, oh, if I had me then, who I am now, future me. And I do this exercise a lot with my clients. And I'm sure we've probably gone some rounds with that of like, okay, what would future you who'd already done this? What would they be saying to you? So yeah, those are some of the techniques. And basically I just learned how to become my own coach. And that's what I try to teach other people to do as well, is how to become their own best coach.
So do you specifically help kind of people who are creative in what they do, or it's broader than that?
Yeah, I mean, I will help other people, but I'm zeroing in on overwhelmed creatives.
Right.
That is the person I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still the person I am at times. This is a lifelong thing. You don't like tick the box and then it's solved forever.
Absolutely. But I think overwhelm and creativity, they kind of go hand in hand, don't they? Because it's not a calm process.
It's messy.
And it's messy, exactly. And it can all
Yeah.
come at once sometimes. And then they can have like a dry spell for months and nothing is coming. And
Mhm. There's a real ebb and flow to it. I think a lot of it is managing your energy, managing your time, but still allowing yourself that freedom to play or to get curious about things, because that's where the creativity, that's where you can get into flow or tap into those things.
yeah, absolutely. And when you were coaching me, as you know, you helped me in many ways, and especially with things like my productivity, as you say, like kind of evening it out, evening my energy and my output out, so it's not just like a flurry of madness and then I'm doing nothing for the rest of the week, making that more consistent and reliable in a way. Also, you definitely helped me kind of assessing my value as well and finding ways to present that value and like loads of other stuff. But one of the things that that I found the most useful, if not the most useful, that you encouraged me to do was to create a manifesto. So, making this manifesto by clarifying like the whole underlying point of what I'm doing has created a benchmark that I can measure like every thought, every plan, every action against. And I've just truly found it invaluable, like not only for Check Your Thread, but also for my own personal life, really. So, this episode is going to be going out at the beginning of 2023. Last year, I made an episode about sewing related resolutions. But this year, I would like to encourage others to create their own personal manifesto. I think that by doing so, it's kind of more fundamentally beneficial. And so, this isn't just for 2023. Like, I honestly think that it's for your life going forward. But I think the start of a new year is a fantastic time to focus on it. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have that mindset of trying to put the previous year, maybe letting some things go. And even though a lot of times people are very busy in the new year, but they're open. They're
Yeah.
open to new ways of doing things, open to ideas. And when you have that abundance mindset, even in the littlest bit, that's an opportunity. And if you can seize on that, then you can start to create a plan for everything that you're doing and having it feed into each other rather than maybe compartmentalizing or having things be at odds with each other.
Absolutely.
We want to align things so that one thing is feeding into the other, or maybe giving you energy, or that you're making space for all the things that you want to do.
Absolutely. Because, like a traditional list of resolutions, which I love, and I'll probably do that as well, but it is like tick, 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 and it in its actions, but it's not necessarily encouraging us to look underneath that. Well, why is that important? Why is it important for me to learn this new skill or to go on that trip or whatever it could be? So I think that the work that making the manifesto makes you do, it is more fundamental. It is kind of the layer beneath that everything else can then be built upon, can't it?
Yeah, it's your through line that tells you what it is that you're doing at the basic level, but all the way up to the why. What's the purpose? What's the big compelling reason for why I'm doing all of these different things? And then you can just run it through the filter. You can, if a new thing comes up, you can ask, well, does this fit all the parts of my manifesto? And if it doesn't, you can decide to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But and I would say, come up with a good reason for yourself so that you remember why you're taking this course of action. But it's very easy then to see when you have your plan laid out, and it's a simple plan. It's something that you can kind of check against real quickly, but then you can see, okay, is this worth doing? Does it fit into my big vision or my goals?
So I have invited you to come and talk to me about what manifestos are, which you've just kind of touched upon, and also like a good approach for maximizing the benefits of this task as well. So what is the fundamental purpose? Like, why are we doing this? And is it just for businesses or small startups?
I think it's for people. It's not just for businesses. You could make it for businesses if you wanted to focus on just that aspect. But, we are people outside of that. So it's hard to just compartmentalize just the business aspect, because you as a person with your values and your goals and your dreams and strengths, you're showing up to that business. So it's really this bigger approach that I think is worthwhile kind of exploring. So that way it's not a work-life balance per se, but a work-life integration.
Nice.
That this is part of who you are as a person.
Yeah. So it's not just for people that are self-employed, for example. It could be for anybody.
Yeah, for anybody. And I think it is especially helpful to have that integration if you are self-employed, because so much of your life is, or if you're a small business owner or solo work or whatever you want to call it, because so much of who you are and even the space that you probably work in is all the same. It's inextricable. You can't really separate it and put it over there and go, okay, that's when I show up to that. It's all you all the time.
Absolutely. So what if people don't like the term manifesto? Because it is kind of politically loaded in a way, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And there are times when you might want to use those terms and like manifesto and reclaim it and say, okay, this, there's aspects of this that appeal to me, and I'm going to use it to maybe elevate or change the definition. So that you can call it whatever you want. You can call it a plan. And I've even got a workbook that I'm working on. That's the Make a Plan workbook, which will be out and available by the time this episode airs. So that will be something to share. And that will cover a lot of the things that we're talking about here. And a plan, people might have issues or kind of thoughts about the word plan, and that can seem maybe stodgy to some or very rigid. But I personally feel the word plan does not have to be a set of constraints or something that is like overly detailed that you have to follow. I think of it almost like a roller coaster or like a set of rails that you just get to show up and just whoosh down them. So you don't have to think too hard. If you've got the plan, the plan tells me what I need to do. That can be really helpful with procrastination. So it could be a plan. It could be a guide. It could be, I was talking with another one of your podcast previous guests, Saskia, about this idea of a code, specifically a dress code.
Oh, a code. I like code. That too. Yeah.
Or, code of conduct, which again, that can sound quite rigid, but we can reclaim it. We can play with the words. You can call it whatever you want.
And different things are going to resonate with different people, aren't they?
Yeah. And for different reasons and at different times. So you call it whatever you want, and then you get to change it if you want to as well.
Absolutely. I personally really like the word manifesto because I feel it has some power to it. And also I think that part of my personal manifesto, which I'm going to go through a little bit later, is that the personal is the political. And I think that, especially as somebody who has spent the best part of a decade working, within the domestic sphere, and that is very kind of looked down upon by society or kind of undermined and not really seen as a really like helpful and important integral part of society, which all of us who are doing it, hopefully all of us who are doing it know that it is, because it literally allows everybody else to go and do what they're doing. And I like to reclaim that whole sense that no, it's important, and it is very, very integral. And every decision that we are making, be that what we buy, what we wear, every item within our homes, these are all political. The personal is political. And so I didn't want to shy away from the kind of political connotation, because, so I'm going on a right rant now, but so much of how we've almost been allowed to behave as people, we are allowed to vote in a general election, but we're not necessarily encouraged to do so because it doesn't necessarily, serve those who are currently in power. And we're allowed to spend our money. And it feels like a lot of other forms of social engagement have either been disbanded, discouraged, made really difficult, or it's been allowed to develop negative connotations. Like, for example, being a member of a union, that's almost become like a fringe thing to do now, rather than something that is integral. And most people aren't part of a political party or don't necessarily attend various community events and stuff. And I feel like, yeah, we're allowed to vote and we're encouraged to shop. And I feel that there are so many other aspects to life, and I want to reclaim as many of them as possible. So that's why I wanted to kind of really link with that kind of political aspect, to remind myself as much as anything that everything we do has a knock-on effect that is broader than ourselves and our homes, you know?
Yeah. And we don't always have to attune to that, but for the parts that we care about, like for you, the name of what you call this, then that's really important, because you can see in everything that you just said how your values are coming up and coming through these values of choice and activism, and, spreading that message, and being able to communicate, and just there's a like a craftiness to the word manifesto. There's like this unassuming kind of I think of zines, and I think of these artifacts of, there were these tools, these resources for action, right? Whether that's political action or personal action or both, because the personal is political. And so, yeah, I see how it all just comes together. I just gave myself chills.
Oh, yay. Well, we know we're on the right track then. When did you first discover the benefits of doing this task?
Actually, I think that's a really great question that I hadn't really thought about before, but I think there was an element of this in my previous jobs. And I think this is, again, that kind of like circling coaching, because in design, especially user experience design, you're always kind of thinking about strategy and that bigger goal. And I've always been a why kid. Why are we doing this? And I'm a counterpoint. So usually in meetings or, whatever, if there's something that's maybe not quite ringing true, or even with crafting, this is a really good example, is I tend to cut a lot of corners, because I'm like, well, if I don't understand why I have to do this way, and if I just can't get behind the meaning of something, I'm not going to do it. Or I'm going to resist it in some way or challenge it.
Yeah, I think I can see that actually. Some of the questions that you've asked me about sewing, I can see that that's your underlying questions. Like, why then? Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
And I think that's so funny, because it really reflects my approach, which is a bit more like, just go along with it, and then hopefully the why will present itself. Yeah, this is why I was really interested in when you got me to do that exercise, because normally I'd be like, right, I'm showing up here, I'm here for the coaching, I'm just going to do whatever Kim tells me to do, I'll do my homework. I'm not really questioning why. I'm like, she knows, it'll all make sense. But the fact that then you asked me like, what? But is I don't. Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know why. Like, I just know the tools, you know the why. And so in coaching, we believe that everybody's creative, resourceful, and whole. You have all of the answers of what it is that's going to make you happy, or what it is that you should be doing, or why you should be doing it. My job is to surface that for you, to help you figure that out for yourself. I could probably suggest or see some things maybe based on experience or talking with other people. But even if I suggest that, and when I do, I usually always ask, and you probably experienced that. I was like, can I make a suggestion, or can I tell you what I'm noticing? Yeah. Yeah. But even when I do that, I might not always be right, or I might not have the best idea. It's like, you probably know better what's going to work for you. Right. And so even when I offer something, I might suggest it really lightly, or just, kind of put it out there and see. And you might jump onto it and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I needed. Because, sometimes too, if people are stuck, they just need the answer. They don't need to be playing question games, right? And that's the thing, is like kind of trying to figure out, okay, is somebody just really stuck and they need, a helping hand out of the hole? Or is it that they just gently need to be challenged a little bit, because the answer is there and there's some sort of block, or they're not seeing it? Or I don't want to interrupt your thinking with my thinking.
So hopefully now we have convinced everyone that making a manifesto, or whatever you would like to call it, is worth giving a try. So can you now please break down the different sections one at a time? Like, what does it consist of?
Sure. So there's 4 major parts. The first is creating a vision. And that is, in its simplest terms, it's just a picture of the world that you want to live in. you may never achieve it. The world may never get that advanced and may not follow your lead on this, but it's just that awareness of like, what is the world that I want to create for myself and others if I was dreaming? And it should be visionary, right? It's not something that you might be able to achieve. It's a big picture. The next stage is the mission statement, or defining your mission. And these four pieces all flow into each other. The mission statement. So this is based on my vision. What is the personal work that I need to do in this world to create that vision? Again, you might not actually create the vision, but the important thing is to do the work. So my mission now is to do this work, to work towards that vision, to work towards that picture of the world that I want to live in. From there, then you can identify your strategy, which is simply put, how am I going to go about this? How am I going to go about this work? Am I going to collaborate with people? Am I going to make a beeline? Am I going to take it really slow and measured? Am I going to work really hard for a year and isolate myself and buckle down? Or am I going to, spread the word and try to reach as many people as possible and get funding? Or am I going to do a local approach and sell my crafts at markets? Or what is it? Right. And underneath that strategy, how you're going to go about it, that's where your values, your principles, all of those different pieces playing to your strengths, that's where that's going to come in as well. And from that, then you lay out the roadmap. So what are the tasks that I need to do to do all of this? And that becomes so much easier when you have those other three pieces: vision, mission, strategy. The roadmap becomes pretty obvious. So you can look at a task and you can say, okay, does that get me to the vision? Is that part of the work that I need to be doing? Does this fit into how I want to be working? And it really cuts down on procrastination, but a lot of that lack of focus.
Yeah, just feeling lost. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have that bigger purpose, that bigger reason, it's really easy to just make a quick on the fly justification for doing any one task. And so you end up kind of bouncing around or switching around without any kind of compelling reason of like, why am I doing this? How does this fit into a bigger picture?
Absolutely. So would you recommend for the maximum success of this then to actually really fill these things out in that specific order?
Yeah. I would definitely start with the vision and just imagine what is the world that I'd like to see. And from there, then it becomes clearer. What is my work to do then? And looking internally in yourself, reflecting, okay, well, how do I want to do this? So for myself personally, like I know that group activities, at least at this point in my life, is not my zone of genius at the moment. It's working with people one-on-one. So that's part of my strategy. And then from there, then it becomes really easy what tasks you should be doing. Most people work in the other order. They start with the tasks.
And then they justify it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, I've been doing these tasks, so that means that I'm this, and this amounts to this bigger thing. It's really hard to work up the chain.
Right. So I've been meaning to share mine / Check Your Threads manifesto for ages. So
please do.
I'm just going to go through it now with your help, just to illustrate those points. Maybe might help people to kind of clarify which each element is. Obviously, I'm going to set this out in the show notes so that people can see clearly what each section is, so they don't have to be manically making notes. So my manifesto / Check Your Thread. So the vision, the world that I want to create, I have got a world where the impact of the environment is factored into every decision.
Love it.
Now, I wrote that a year ago. I'm still standing by that. And that is ultimately it. It's like everything we do, I think we should think about the impact that has on the world. And whether that's sewing, whether that's cooking, whether that's how I'm going to go to work, it may not lead every decision, but it should be considered and factored in at least.
So then the next one is, because you've got this vision of the world that you're thinking about all the choices and impact. Mm-hmm. Therefore, what is your work? What is your mission in this?
So my mission, I've got help people make more sustainable choices by giving them information, ideas, inspiration, and agency. So
Yes.
that's what I try to do with the podcast episodes.
I keep getting chills as you read these.
Oh, that's so nice. So I hope that, every podcast episode at least provides, if not all four, but some information, some ideas, some inspiration, or some agency. My second part is, by starting to sow more sustainably, it's then possible to do lots of other things more sustainably. That these ideas and approaches can spread out into many areas of life. Now, personally, I've definitely found that, because I've always been into clothes. I studied fashion design. It's always been my focus. But then when I started thinking about how I acquire my clothes, then that led to me thinking about, what things I bring into my home more generally, those things, those ideas. This is why sometimes I think, is this podcast really going to make any impact? Like, focusing on sewing more sustainably, like, that seems so small in the face of the climate crisis. But then I remind myself that no, because these ideas and these approaches, it does give you then something to hang your hat on, and then it spreads. You can't help but have it spread into other areas of your life, I think.
Yeah. I think as you were saying that, the metaphor or the idea that came to mind was for you is that, like, sewing all of this is that gives you purchase. It gives you something to hang on to, a way in to that you can leverage for all the other areas of your life. Right. So because you've got this base of experience and this passion and this love around these activities, it gives you purchase to, even no matter how small. That's why sometimes the smallest bit of purchase is all that you need to just gets you to a new place, gets you to applying and exploring in a new area.
Definitely. And it gives you confidence, because, like, oh, I do that with my sewing.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it
already
gives
do
you,
that already. Yeah.
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 Cool. So then my third part of my mission is spread the idea that living more sustainably can be fun and fulfilling, not about hand-wringing, eco-snobbery, or depriving yourself. So that was an important one, because I think it can be very worthy, and there's a lot of people who are looking down you for having a car or eating the occasional burger and stuff like that. It's not about perfection. It's about having a go,
Yeah.
and it can be fun, and it can be a challenge, and you can embrace that. And it doesn't have to be, it is obviously stressful and it's scary, like the climate crisis is, but it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, because, you still got to live ultimately. So
What I love about that is you've baked part of the strategy, part of your principles and how you're going to do that into the work, into the mission. And I think that's a really nice way to go. Like, these don't have to be separate pieces.
And then the last part of my mission is Check Your Thread reflects the values of a wider community of people having ideas, interesting conversations, and making things happen. Our Check Your Thread sub-community feels positive, supportive, and fun. And that's why I try and present a wide range of voices and people coming at it from different angles, because everybody's going to connect with something different. And so the more things that I can present to people, more lights I can shine on what's already happening, the more chances you have of finding something that inspires you, that will give you that oomph to try something in a different way.
Some small examples of how you do that, like throughout your podcast, and one that came up from a recent podcast was that distinction that you had about living sustainably versus living more sustainably. Right? The wording there of just adding the more to that phrase. Just these small things that bring insight to other people that maybe hadn't considered that angle. They're coming from a different place. So, I come from a place of language where I really care about those word choices, and that's what I'm going to zero in on and attune to. So when you offer that small piece of insight, I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I can easily notice and start incorporating. And I think that distinction is really key to what you were saying about not trying to be perfect. We're not going to get to perfect sustainability. Nothing is 100% sustainable.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So strategy. So what is a strategy? Can you remind us?
So that's the how you're going to go about this work. So, what sort of methods or approaches are you willing to do or want to do, and what aren't you willing to do? So strategy also includes, like, the ways that you won't be working with people to achieve this mission.
The strategy I've got, create a balance between seriousness and joy, inspiration and fun. So there, I've also got specific ideas and concepts are applicable to broader ways of being. Continually making more resources that allow people to engage with ideas and content in new ways and on different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I've got organic growth through genuine interactions and explorations of common goals. So not through creating loads of adverts and stuff, but genuinely just putting the work in, having conversations with people that are engaging with what I'm doing, and reciprocating that kind of energy.
Yeah. That's a great example. And then you even came up with a very specific, okay, it's not advertisements, right?
Yeah.
That makes really, so then when you get that question of like, there's an offer, or should I be doing, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, whatever, then it's very easy to answer that question.
Yeah. It's like, no, it's written down.
Yeah, that doesn't fit in the manifesto. Can we go back to that first one that you had? So that
Sure.
balance of like seriousness, joy.
Yeah, so balance between seriousness and joy, inspiration and fun.
Yes, love it. So you've got like a quadrant there. What comes to mind of any examples of that, when, not to put you on the spot, but I think it would be interesting for your listeners.
So, I mean, not making light of the climate crisis, not making light of the difficulties we've got, but also there is a joy to be had in, I mean, most people are sewing because they want to, because it's their passion, because it's their hobby, because it's their pastime, because it's their way of decompressing after a hard day at work, or doing something with their hands when they've been looking at a screen all day. There's all these different reasons why people sew. And mainly it's because they're choosing to do it because it's bringing them joy, because it's bringing them these benefits. And I don't want to whittle away at that and be like, no, we've got to be so worthy and it's got to be part of living a very sustainable life. It's like, no.
Yeah. That's great. Like, what I'm hearing from that is, it's not that you want to suck all the joy out of this for people, right? It's that you want people to feel that joy, but you're just adding deeper meaning for them. You're adding some more purpose to what they're doing without that weighing it down or, becoming heavy or too serious.
Absolutely. A good example of this was a very recent conversation I had 2 episodes ago with Judy Willamette-Ross, who's an amazing maker based in New Zealand. And she has got she's developed herself a very almost strict code of how she acquires the materials that she sews with. Like, she goes to op shops and she makes sure that she's buying things that will probably go to landfill otherwise. She gets the things that are already damaged, unless she gets something that isn't damaged, but she knows she's going to use pretty much every ounce of it. And then she has these other structures of, I think largely she works with natural fibers. She makes sure she doesn't buy garments that are plus size, because they can be harder for plus size people to source secondhand garments. So she has all these things. And then within that, when she has the resources, how she uses them, what's left, how she then deals with that, and then what's left from that. And she has all these stages. And from the outside, or maybe some people would see the way that she works as quite restricted. She has put a number of restrictions in for herself, but within that, it forces her to be so creative and resourceful that she's bringing all these fun challenges and elements of inventiveness to that is just creating layers and layers of meaning and extra enjoyment, that if she just allowed herself to go to the fabric shop, buy 3 meters of whatever she likes, go home and sew it, wouldn't have the same thing, So
it would just be buying into desire rather than the constraints allow us to be a little bit more creative and, like you said, creative and resourceable. Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be how everybody sews, and she's the first to acknowledge that. But it was really interesting to hear her, the way she was presenting it as such a really, really fun and enjoyable and deep process. And it's like, yes, this is really interesting. And I know that she inspired a lot of people through that. So that was a cool one.
Yeah, I found it really enlightening, that episode, and especially what she was saying, and you touched upon this a minute ago, is about the plus size fabrics. That was a nuance that I hadn't considered as a naive, kind of inexperienced sewer who's on the look for new fabrics. I would probably, if my first outing to a thrift shop, I would probably gravitate towards that. But now I won't. won't, because
Yeah.
I understand that this is actually an equity issue. And by indulging myself in a plus size fabric, I might be denying somebody else who might actually need that garment. Right.
Yeah.
I wonder too, if that makes a good question that people can ask themselves at the start of this year is like, what are the things, structures, ideas that I want to unlearn so that I can make space to learn new ways of doing things and new patterns for thinking.
Wow. Cool. So I've also got tactics, but then I've also got, when do values and principles fit in?
Those fit into strategy. So that's, they cut across all of them, but they often get defined in strategy.
Okay. So shall I quickly go through those?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
What do you got?
So we've got values and principles. Limiting my contribution to climate change where possible. The personal is political, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
Helping to redress income inequality, helping to address racial inequality, helping to address homophobia, promoting feminist thinking, creating joy, and finding a balance between living as sustainably as possible and having a happy, fulfilling life.
Yeah. So that creates some rails or guidelines, a little bit of a pathway of how you're going to go about fulfilling your mission, right? It tells you what sorts of factors come into play, what you will and won't do. It makes it quite obvious to then run the tactics, the tasks, the actual work to be done through that filter. You can take any task.
I can see that.
Yeah. So like, let's play with an example. Is there a task or a opportunity maybe that's come up where it's like, oh, should I do this thing? Should I be?
Okay. Well, you could maybe, for example, you could be invited onto somebody's podcast.
Yeah. Without naming a podcast. Like, is there
a fictional podcast?
Yeah. So a fictional podcast about maybe something that's like craft adjacent. You're asking yourself, should I do this? Right. And then you can take what you know about that podcast and run it through those principles and ask. So turning all of those principles that you had, let's just pick one from your list, turn it into a question. So what's one of them?
Creating joy.
Okay. So then you can just flip that around into a question. How will my going on this podcast create joy? Right. And I purposely flip that around to an open-ended question, not will it create joy? Because then it's like yes or no, and then your work is done, which may be fine. But the how will I forces you to think and maybe consider some possibilities that maybe you hadn't considered. And if you can't come up with anything, then the answer is no. Right.
Brilliant. So awesome. So those are the values and principles that you can work on to benefit your strategy. And then lastly, it is tactics. Or did you have another word rather than tactics?
Yeah, I said roadmap, but we're essentially talking about the same thing. So it's like, what are the actual tangible things that I need to be doing? So that could be tactics, that could be tasks. It could be, a whole bunch of tasks laid out on a map, a timeline, which is a roadmap. It's just kind of different ways of talking about similar things. And you go with whatever terms that appeal to you. I know some people, they want a really, not unchangeable, but they want a visual plan that's quite detailed. So such as a roadmap that has like timelines and milestones and markers. I work with another client who's very, very creative coder and creator, and he rejects any sort of structure. So if there's any sort of structure to what we're doing, and at the same time, he still needs some, but if it's formalized structure, if it's process structure, then he's just going to bounce off of it. It's not going to.
Wow. That must be challenging for you, no?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah. Cause it really forces me to think about how to ask questions and how to, like I said, I learn from everybody. So that has really advanced my coaching in a different way.
So you literally like, that they're coming up on your schedule, the call's about to start and you're like, right, game on.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true with everybody. I'm like, okay, how can I help them? The question for me almost always is like, what's going to be useful for them? Is it going to be useful if I give them some structure or a thought or offer something? Or is it going to be useful if I, kind of scale it back and present these really big sky questions? Right. And so, like, oftentimes with him, it'll be these really big sky questions. And that, because he's a verbalizer, that will get him thinking. And he'll just, through that process of talking something out loud and visioning and really kind of thinking big picture, really helps him zero in on, what it is and what it's about. But some people approach things completely different, and they need to maybe really get into the details and thinking about all the different pieces and all the different tasks, and then, sorting them. Or, one thing I often recommend, and I'm sure we've done this as well, is the do, dump, delegate, or delay. So you've got all of your tasks, all of the projects that you should be doing, but we don't want them all active in our head at the same time. That's not helpful. So that process of sorting things out, some people really resist that, right? And that's fine. Yeah. That resistance isn't always a sign that you shouldn't do something as well. It's like, sometimes, like, I'm resisting starting my sewing pattern for making my first garment entirely on my own. But that's just because I'm uncomfortable, because I'm a little bit scared. Right. So I'm just going to acknowledge that and lean into that and just go, yeah, you're scared. That's fine. It's scary.
In that, we're coming back to that. So my response to this isn't they're very, very broad. I've literally just got the spheres of almost like the arenas in which I'm working in. So I've got the Check Your Thread podcast, I've got Instagram and social media, I've got Me Made May, and I've got speaking and teaching opportunities. So that's literally all I've got. But how else could you respond to the tactics section?
Yeah.
Or the task section?
Yeah. And that brings up a really good point. And I love the way that you've done that, because that is like these big kind of almost pillars of your work, right? Which makes sense. It's very easy to see that connected to the mission and vision. So I think it speaks to a bigger, different topic, which is the way of looking at it in terms of timescales. So the vision is like this big overarching piece that's probably not changing a whole lot. It's going to be, tiny little tweaks. The mission, your work might evolve. So in, a couple of years, you might add a pillar, or you might, evolve the podcast into something even bigger, or whatever. But as we start to get down to the tactics level, then we're getting into timescales. So you could be looking at this at the week level, or even the day level. What am I doing today? Right. And what you've got is more of the maybe seasonal, or kind of like big picture of tactics of like, what am I doing right now? What are the actual projects?
Yeah, you could take that in any way you want, then, like however you feel it would be most useful to you. Like, I'm zooming right in. Because some people do like a 3-month thing, don't they? Like a seasonal thing.
Sometimes people are sat at their desk and it's 10 a.m. on Monday, and they're looking at their calendar or their task list, but it's not clear for them what they should be doing. And that's not a task problem. It's because they're actually questioning themselves at the vision level or the mission level. Like, what is my work to be done? Because they haven't done the work to think that through or solidify it. So it makes it very difficult when you're sitting there going, for this next hour, what am I supposed to be doing? Right. And so there's some part of this is kind of like understanding where you are. Okay, where's my thinking at? Oh, I'm thinking at the project level at the moment, or I'm thinking at the task level, and I'm really questioning what it is I should be doing in this moment versus what am I doing with my life? Yeah.
Awesome. So have you made your own?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that was one of the places that I started, and then thought, this is pretty useful. I'm going to see how this works on other people. Because it's not always going to be the same. Right. But my vision is, I imagine a world where people are thinking really critically about what they're doing, and everybody's kind of fulfilling their potential. They're working in their zone of genius. They're managing that overthinking energy. So I tend to work with overthinkers a lot. People people who have very busy minds. So they're channeling all that overthinking energy into expert thinking, into thinking critically about what they're doing and their place in the world for others. So therefore, my work, my mission is to help create these expert thinkers, is to create these platforms and these methods and ways for people to manage their minds, manage their thoughts, and work within their zone of genius and achieve great things. And so the strategy, the way that I'm going to go about it is, for now, this is all living document, is working with people one-on-one. I want to reach people who are leaders, who are overwhelmed creatives, and I want to work with them one-on-one to help them like really do a deep dive of what are they about? What do they need to do to fulfill their potential? And then they can go on and self-coach through that to become leaders of themselves and their businesses, but then also spread that message to other people. So that's the kind of mechanism of action. And so then the tactics, the way I do that, my pillars, is through coaching, one-on-one coaching, through my coaching program, through mini coaching workshops, usually one-on-one, as I'd prefer to do at this time. That could change. And then doing some research and design consulting on the side, and maybe a little bit of mentoring as well.
So good. Yeah. I can't believe you're like, bam, bam, bam.
It's evolved. It's not always been that clear to me, right?
Yeah.
But then you practice it, you live by it, you keep referring back to it in various ways or questioning it. I think for me, questioning things is a big way to solidify information. Is like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's in fact what I was just about to ask. Do you think it makes sense for time to time to kind of go back and re-look and reevaluate, check that those things are still true to how you're feeling?
Absolutely, because ideally you're living it all the time without even, having to think about it. But if you're forgetting about it and then straying from it, then there's probably a disconnect between making the plan versus enacting the plan. And so it should be up to date and something that you like. Again, it's a living document, so you want to keep it up to date, but it needs to be lightweight enough for you that you can use it. And it's not like, oh, that thing, right? That is too much.
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't become like a weight around your shoulders.
Yeah. Because then it's like, oh, your life's work is this albatross that you don't want to, And if life's work is too heavy, then by all means, don't call it that. But yeah, check in with it. And it should be like, oh yeah, that sounds good. That motivates me,
Absolutely. Rereading through mine really made me feel like, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was excited to share it.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so glad you did. And then notice, and this is true for everybody out there, notice your reactions, your emotional reaction as you share it. Even as you read it out loud, if you're reading it out loud to yourself, what parts did I struggle with? What was my voice like? How do I feel in my body? That's going to be really good information if there maybe needs to be some adjustment or some emotions around it that you need to manage.
Yes. Right? Brilliant. Amazing. So I'm going to put loads of links in the show notes and the breakdown of what we discussed. And I know you're going to hopefully send me some links to clarify some elements of that. And obviously, I'll put the link to your website as well, so people can get in touch directly if they have any more questions. So let's get on to making. So I remember the first time that I realized that you were a maker, because I think we'd had a couple of sessions and it was wintertime, and I noticed that you were wearing a really cool neck warmer. And I was like, I wonder if she made that. And then it turned out you did. And honestly, I felt even more connected to you than I did previously, knowing that you make things with your hands. So what was your first craft medium? And how did making and crafting come into your life? Has it always been in your life?
It's always been in my life. Probably my first substantial craft medium, because there was lots of things when I was younger, was knitting. And I learned to knit randomly on a train. I think I was like maybe 9 years old. I was with my mom on a train and in California. I forget where we were going. And there was a woman across from us in the facing seats. And she was knitting, and it was a long train ride. And she just taught me how to knit. And right then and there. And so that just started knitting for me. And then when I moved to the UK 12 years ago, I met somebody who taught me how to crochet. Yeah. And so I picked up crochet, and now I mix the two, which is really nice.
You weren't seeking crochet. It kind of serendipitously appeared.
Yeah. So this friend that I'd met while I was doing my PhD program, this was in York in the north, and she was wearing a crochet hat. And I was like, "Oh, did you knit that?" And she's like, "No, it's crochet. It's so much faster." And I was like, "Really? Tell me more."
Tell me more.
Yeah. But then there's also been all these other projects that I get into randomly. Watercolors. My I guess
Oh, really?
2020 pandemic project was getting into watercolors, and so painting, drawing. I drew a lot when I was a kid. Just this past weekend, I made a bunch of candles. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you blew my mind. I didn't know that you could knit and crochet within the same project.
Oh, yeah, because I'm fundamentally, I was going to say fundamentally lazy, but that's like not the words that I want to choose
Evidently
or
not.
gravitate. Yeah, I like things to be easy. There's a part of me that wants to bend the medium to my will. I'm at the point now where knitting's actually probably a little bit faster for me. And there's reasons why you would want to knit something, and especially if it's in a circle, it's quite easy, has a nice look. But then when we get to the part where I want to shape something, then I just feel like I'm sitting there with two knitting needles like planks. It just doesn't work for me. But then I can get that hook in there and I can start making things, like maybe the shape of the top of a hat or the band or something. And then that gives it a different style as well. So there's all the knitting stitches versus all the crochet stitches. But at the start of a project, I might actually flip between the two quite a bit because I really struggle to follow patterns or follow instructions.
Yeah. So sewing. What inspired you to have a go at sewing? Was it just inevitable? Or did you meet someone on a train?
I met somebody on Zoom, Zoe.
Oh.
Yes, that was you. That was 100%
Really?
you.
You hadn't considered
I had,
before?
and I tried sewing in the past. I'd even sewn some things with a really clunky sewing machine that I kept snapping needles. I didn't have anybody teach me, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I always felt that sewing was so fiddly, and it was just this world of complication that I wasn't ready to. I didn't have a way in. And, this goes with that theme we were talking about earlier. And I'm not necessarily a rules follower. I'm a figure outer and a why person. I need to understand why is this going to be worth my time? Why do I want to get into the fiddliness of it, and how can I get around it? How can I get through this hurdle of, the precision that's required? I think of it a lot like cooking. I'm not a great baker because baking usually requires measurements and precision and process and patience. And I want to see results. I want things to be playful, and I want to change my mind and throw something in the mix. So often what I do with cooking and with crafting and now with sewing is I'll look at something. I'll look at 5 different recipes or 5 different patterns and try to get the idea of it and be like, okay, I see what's going on here. I understand the system. I understand the mechanism. Now I'm going to try to have a go at it. The problem with that is you don't end up with consistency. So my challenge is to learn, and I'm learning like the discipline and the structure and the reason why you would make, let's say, is it called a toile here?
Toile, yeah, or muslin, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why you would make that, which before I knew you,
it sounds like madness.
It's just like, why would I make the thing fake before I make the thing? But then again, hearing myself say that, there's a really good reason for it coming from the fields that I've been in before in design and UX. Of course, you would make the prototype before you make the real thing. Making the real thing is expensive. It's risky. So make the prototype first. I've just self-coached. You just coached me through this.
You just found that link right there, because at first you were thinking, I was thinking, oh, where's she going with this? Like, how's she going to apply that thinking to sewing? Because it is probably quite methodical. And I was like, oh, and then you made that link to your previous, and I was like, yes, you see now.
Yeah. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, is people know the examples that are going to resonate with them. If you just provide the conditions and the space for people to think out loud and to explore this space, they're going to come up with things that will now, like for me now forever, I will understand the value of prototyping, of making the toile before I make the piece. Because this was a conversation I think we had as well with Saskia about crafting and knitting. Is like, why do I need to make this knitting swatch? I don't get it. I still kind of don't get it, but I did for my last project. I was curious about it. And that was because you were sharing your swatches for the jumper that you were making. And I was like, okay, she's getting value out of this. And I understand that she's experienced and you were modeling a way, because you're somewhat new to knitting. Yes.
Very new. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were modeling the way that somebody would have a sensible, reasoned approach would go about it. And you were showing the benefit of that. And so that allowed me to kind of see, without actually having to do it.
That's so interesting.
See and go, yeah, that's okay. I can see how that's working for her. I think I like that. I think I want that for myself. I might go make a swatch. So I did. I made a swatch for my last jumper that I'm working on. And I just used it mainly to try different stitches and see how they looked with the yarn. But it did also help me with the gauge. But
brilliant.
I had the gauge set because I crocheted the ribbing, because I like the way that crochet ribbing works. And then I had the width that I needed. And then I added the all the loops so that I could just knit that ribbing into a circle.
So if you didn't have that kind of creative, how could I make this easy for myself approach, you wouldn't have made your ribbing with crochet. You'd have just knitted it like the knitting pattern suggested. So
yeah, and then it probably would have been the wrong gauge, because I used the crochet, the ribbing as the guide for the gauge, essentially, for the swatch. That told me how many stitches I needed, because it was the right length around my hips.
Yeah. So you were literally crocheting and then holding it to your hips till you got the right length. Interesting. Cool. I don't even crochet, so I'm not even going to try and do that, but still just.
But you already have so much like experiential basis for figuring things out from years and years of crafting and sewing, that you have a sense of things that you don't even realize maybe that you have, even if it's just about fit and shape and how garments are constructed.
But back to language, that I really felt like I worked so hard to learn the language of sewing. I wanted to learn to knit for so long, but I did feel like that is a whole new language. I'm going to have to go back to complete square one. And that's actually what put me off learning for ages, was thinking like, that learning curve, I don't know if I've got the energy. And you just, when you really want to, you just do, don't you? You just get in there. Yeah. And when the time feels right, you just do it. So how's your journey of sewing been so far?
It's been transformative and amazing and incredible. And I was just reviewing my list of the best and worst investments that I made in 2022.
Yeah.
And so these sewing classes with Ministry of Craft up in Manchester have been absolutely amazing. That was hands down my best investment of the year.
Oh, fantastic. So what made you decide to sign up to an in-person class to kind of kickstart your sewing journey?
I wanted to work with somebody, and I wanted to have like one-on-one instruction. I'm really good if I'm just making something or there's a product at the end and somebody's showing me how to do something. And I always want to know the tips and tricks. Like I always want to know like all the pragmatic knowledge of the things that people don't tell you, but the things that you kind of need to learn, because that's where I got stuck. I can figure out a lot of things, but I don't know why I was snapping needles on that old sewing machine, years ago. I just got frustrated with it. I can't even speak anymore, that I gave up. Right. And so that was a huge obstacle for me. And it's just, I found the perfect format. I just really got so lucky that it was exactly what I wanted. And it's either been like one-on-one or small group classes kind of locally here. And it just fits into, I was thinking about this, it fits into my values and my personal manifesto, as well as it's also kind of the similar strategy that I'm choosing to do with coaching, this more kind of like one-on-one style, so that it empowers somebody to go off and then go spread the word or do other things. But that has kicked off this this whole entire just kind of journey, it's just opened up a world of possibilities for me. And I purchased a sewing machine. So that was my number two best investment, was a computerized sewing machine. So then I've been able to hem all of my trousers and mend things and all of this. I'm a 5-foot person. So I'm very, very, very short. And having pants, having trousers that fit lengthwise is not, now I can go buy anything and I want to, and I can make my own trousers.
Yeah.
But even if I didn't, I could, it's just opened up the things I could buy, right? Instead
Amazing.
of trying to find things or pay to get them tailored, which I'm loath to do.
So you were saying that it's interesting that you have gravitated towards a learning style that is how you teach in a way with your coaching, like the kind of the one-on-one. So how does it feel being the one on the other side of that then?
Well, that's another thing, is like, I can see both the benefits, but where my own challenges are coming up and how I'm meeting those challenges. I have to self-coach myself through certain things. And I'm like, yeah, oh yeah. Just sometimes I get frustrated, or sometimes I'm just laughing at myself that I have to pick something apart. There was this moment where I was taking a class. It was an all-day Saturday class, and we were making this thing called a wiggle dress. So it's a nice form-fitting dress. And by the end of the day, you have a full dress. There was a moment where, so this is an example of me just learning my own brain and struggling to work with my own brain. So I definitely have a very busy brain. I'm off doing a million things, and I have hyper focus, and then I have just complete lack of focus. So I have to kind of manage those energy ebbs and flows. And there was a point, there was other people in the course that were making different garments. And so the instructor, so it was amazing, was bouncing around between all of us. And there was a part where I could finish the zipper and I finished the darts that I was making. And I was just looking at this one, I think sleeve. Oh, it was the zipper pocket, and it was inside out. And I was just like, oh, I don't like this. I bet she's going to tell me to do this thing. So I just went ahead and seamed it off. And then she came back and she's like, what are you doing? You just kind of went rogue there, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I did. And then she showed me this way to turn the corner, the zipper out. And she's like, here's how we'll finish this. Let me show you a trick. She very recognized that I just wanted a way to make this neater, but I'd gone completely rogue. And then she showed me this trick and then just turned the corner out. It was an invisible zip, and it looked so gorgeous. And I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
And she saw it, she's like, I'm gonna bring you back now, Kim. Come to me,
exactly.
Kim. Come back.
Exactly.
Come to the light.
Oh, totally. And she just like very lovingly and playfully just laughed at me and was like, what are you doing? And is that, really it was cute. Just such a good illustrative example of me and my brain and trying to work with it. And, so yeah, these are all like learning opportunities in so many ways, and self-coaching opportunities. And then I myself have a coach, and I think all coaches should as well, as part of the professionalization of the industry. So I learned from being in the hot seat as well. But I think those examples from other parts of your life in the world, those are the kind of real world examples that are really organic and can teach you things. And you can learn from those examples. You can lift and shift what's working onto harder stuff. So that was a really creative, fun, playful space where I can laugh at myself next time when I'm making a mistake, maybe with my business or just kind of going off the rails, losing the plot a little. And then I might be really hard on myself about it. I can just hopefully stop and go, wait, you've been here before.
I just went a bit rogue. Yeah. I can come back from this.
Yeah. There's probably a really neat way of doing this task that I'm trying to do. Do I want to slow down and give myself the energy and the patience and grace to learn it? Or to ask somebody to help me.
And who can you ask? Exactly. Yeah. Maybe there's someone you could ask. Yeah. Brilliant. So what's your next step with sewing? Did you say is a solo sewing project? Is that the next step?
Yeah. So I've got a book, the Gertie Sews Vintage Casual book that has all the patterns in it, which is just amazing. But then I also in one of the sewing classes, we made the Pietra pants, which were the trousers, which were incredible. And so I've got that pattern now. I sent off for the print, and I'm going to now make that all on my own. And
Fantastic.
because I'm familiar with the pattern, I've made it before in the class, I feel somewhat comfortable making it.
I think that would be a really good
on
confidence boost.
And then I might, go for the book after that. And the goal here, so I've developed a 2023 goal around this, is I realized with the things that I was making and mending that I could, by May of 2023, have a wardrobe to really fully participate in Me Made May, which is something that you introduced me to that I am now thrilled about. And I love the way that there's no kind of fixed overarching goal. You're not telling people how to do it or how to promote it. People get to set their own goals around that and participate in it in the way that they want with the crafts that they want. And so I thought about it before when we'd first met and you had introduced me to this challenge. I thought, okay, well, knitting and crochet in May, I don't know what I could do. But with the addition of sewing and where I could be by May, it's so doable. And so, that is transformative. Yeah. I'm so excited about this. So
it's a nice goal as well.
Yeah. It's an achievable goal. It's a good time frame. I'm, working at a pace that I want. It's fun. I'm learning. This sewing has opened up an absolute world of possibilities. And that's why, it's my top investment in myself. And
amazing. I love that. I'm so happy to hear that. So obviously you can participate in Me Made May even if you have just one self-made item, but I do fully acknowledge that it'll probably be more illuminating, beneficial, and potentially fun if you have a broader selection. So I'm so excited that you have that goal to continue on your journey of sewing self-discovery, and I can't wait to find out what your pledge is going to be, and I can't wait to follow along.
Yeah, I love that. I'm excited to find out what my pledge is going to be as well. My mind's already like going in a million directions.
Yeah. Well, right now you can just focus on creating some pieces that you enjoy, that you're learning from, that fit your body. That's, you've got the goal to get to there. And then that can give you then the illumination to help you discover your next goal.
Yeah. That brings up a really interesting point too, like what you were saying about fitting your body. The joy of having clothes that fit, that's been new as a really short person with all of, everybody has particulars about their body. That's been a new experience, but it just feels so much better. And my thoughts about clothes over the last 3 years have changed so much as my body's changed and gaining weight over COVID and then aging, like my body's changed, but also jeans, they're not comfortable. And they no longer fit me. So now I'm thinking, okay, I could make all of these things that fit me really well. And then I feel good in my body. Like it feels good to be wearing clothing rather than a reminder of like the way my waistband is pinching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I'm working on an episode at the moment that's going to come out probably in January about almost future-proofing your makes. So you can factor in changing body shape, weight gain, things like that to a certain extent. So maybe that would be something to
what features go into that? I'm so curious. Like,
you'll have to wait to listen to the episode. But you're on the path that you need to be on. Like, you need to learn construction techniques. You need to learn about your body, learn about the fabrics and certain techniques. And then it's like next level. Let's add the next level to this,
Yeah. I love it. This has been incredible. I have a million ideas that I want to pursue.
Oh, awesome.
And I want your listeners to pursue their visions and
absolutely
create their personal guide or manifesto.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all about, the behind the scenes about how like coaching works. That in itself was really fascinating, and how you came to it. And I found that very inspiring, that it was something that you were kind of circling around for a long time and it became inevitable. And I love how many links that there's been in this conversation between various kind of aspects of who we are and how our lives have shaped out and stuff. And I am very grateful for you to really the way that you broke down what a manifesto is and how people can get the most from it. And thank you also for sharing about your sewing journey as well. And I'm beyond excited to follow your next steps, and maybe we can have a talk around May. Come back to that, and we can talk about how you got on and what the next step is for your sewing journey.
I love that. And right back at you. I'd love to hear how the manifesto has evolved into 2023. And then as we're in May and where you're at, the pillars and, if things have changed or what you've added or, all of that. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm so honored to be.
You. Thank you. It's been amazing.
You got it.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!